anyhow, we're now in the transit through the 20, and this is actually my radiant sphere in my hologenetic profile. So certainly an interesting energy for me to talk about. But the gene key 20 is the shadow of superficiality, and it goes to the city of presence. And the gift is self-assurance. And it comes along with the archetype of the tranquil. So I'm very much excited to talk about this particular energy today and this archetype, even though the very first thing mentioned about it in the Gene Keys book is that it's almost impossible to wrap your intellect around the quality of this particular energy. And I'm excited about where this contemplation might lead us today. Speaking of the tranquil, so Bella, what are your observations about how this gene key functions, or what are some qualities of this archetype, whether low frequency or high frequency, that we can see in ourselves, in other people? And how does that relate to wind over earth?
Yeah, I was going to start with elements today, because isn't that the earth? I mean, wind over earth. If you think about what it is to be on this earth, that's the most natural and normal thing. Like the wind is always there. It's the presence, it's what always moves. And it's also kind of what takes us to the future. If we think about gate 57 that connects, is a harmonic gate with that 20. It's the gentle wind, and that is about the future. It takes us into the future, the intuition of what's coming. Yeah, that's the first thing that comes to me.
I hadn't considered that quality of time, because at least not from that perspective, because the 20, wind over earth, is really all about the present. And yet there is a quality in this energy of how our awareness can observe, how it can experience, how our awareness can function, that involves watching the movements, whether it be of time or wind or the events of our experience. And through that observation, coming to some state that moves our evolution through this present moment to the next present moment to the next present moment. So, I mean, when we think about evolution, Bella, like, what does this idea of the wind bring for you? And what you mentioned, yes, intuition is all about being aware of the likely movements, that where those are going to land, because you've observed enough for it to be like an unconscious awareness. So how is our evolution playing with this?
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I see, of course, a lot of like Buddha in this, because when I feel like this hexagram is about observing things the way they are, because it's always going to be the earth with the wind. That's eternal. And it is when you are there and you can see things for what they are, when you can receive things, because it's the receptive earth, as for what they are, as they're coming and leaving and going with the wind. I mean, that isn't that in a way, that at least speaks of our evolution, which I think is evolution of the consciousness or awareness of what we are. And maybe then the evolution of consciousness is what together all of us can observe, can contemplate.
Yeah, it strikes me that if we're out in nature and observing the wind blowing, there's literally nothing to do about it. Doesn't matter if the wind is gentle or if it's fierce, if it's blowing things around, whatever. There's nothing that we can do to stop it. There's nothing that we can do except observe it. And then, of course, we humans have to put ourselves into environments that are kind of sheltered from that reality to some extent, depending on, where we live. And this quality of observation without action, without taking intentional action, maybe. I mean, I'm sure many of you here have explored some version of meditation, or different ways of examining how our awareness functions. And like, when you start to study meditation, you begin to recognize that observation is an action. In fact, even inaction is an action, at least from our perspective. And when we really like hone in on this present moment, it feels like the fact that you brought up the future, Bella, I think is so interesting, because this gene key has its roots in so far in our past that we weren't even humans yet, in terms of our evolutionary experience of consciousness. That, this consciousness began with insects, and here we are in human bodies, supposedly so far evolved beyond the insect world, at least from the Western perspective. And yet so many people in our society are running around doing the thing, basically acting like insects, like just busy, 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 busy. And, I wonder, obviously from the gene keys perspective, this is about frequency. We get busy when we're in a low frequency, self-assurance when we're at a higher frequency. And if we transcend, now there's like nothing left except consciousness. So, what's going on with our minds? Why are we doing this with our minds? Like if at some point in our evolutionary history, we had access to this like spiritually aware presence that exists as our nature, and this is where we bring up the context of Eden. And if that exists in our history, how is this mental busyness of constant activity and spreading complexity and all of these other shadows that kind of go along with it that support us in our busyness, how is this serving humanity somehow? Like, what is it doing for us when it just seems like the promised land is actually a long time ago, before anybody can remember anything?
Yeah, I think there are two places to look at, or two perspectives with this. And again, I would bring back the 57 and the 34 and the 10, because when we are looking at the body graph, we're going to see the integration channels. So here we have a crossroads that is different than anywhere else in the body graph, because we always have two gates that meet and they create a channel. But here we have four that come together. So we have the 34 in the sacral, the life force. We have the 57 in the spleen, which is that intuition or instinct. Then we have the 10 in the G, which is the natural behavior. And then we have the 20, which is more subtle because it's all the way up in the throat. And they're all connected to each other. So of course, when we are speaking about that 34-20 and you're speaking about the busyness, yeah, we have the manifesting generator, you're a manifesting generator, and you have that in your incarnation cross. So of course, at a low level, we are going to be busy with something that isn't super evolved, but it's also that busyness. I would say that at the end of it, you know, when we keep being busy, I think also that there is evolution there. We say that the integration channels is where we went from being walking on four legs to standing up as human beings. So it has served to have the intuition, to have the life force, to have the behavior, and to have the presence in the now. Like when we have those four, we in the process of being alive there and not available for outside influence, like we kind of in that very individual, like even more than the individual. For me, that it's not wrong to be like, there is something very magical here. And the other thing, the other place to look at for me here is the awareness center. So we went from being splenic, like insects, we just like avoid things because we want to survive. And then we have been stuck like human beings in the ajna, in the left brain for a long time, problem solving with busy. And now we are coming down and we're integrating more of the solar plexus, which is the third awareness center that still is evolving. So again, we're, you know, here as well, the same thing is with the gates. We are integrating more. And that's the whole, like the trinity of things that come together. And with the awareness centers, there is a purification happening in the solar plexus. And I have felt a lot just this week about what's the difference in this mutation that's going on in our evolution awareness through the solar plexus. What's the different role of the open, undefined solar plexus, of the defined solar plexus? Like, what is emotional clarity? What is a wave in the emotional center as opposed to a storm that I kind of have felt? What is emotional transparency? Like for me, a lot is happening here. And that also helps me, I believe, like somehow I feel like there has to be, all the parts have to be integrated, because when we are very busy and unavailable for outside influence in the integration channels, like we might kind of like have to then be thrown out of that to feel something in the solar plexus. But it is really all about everything coming into the middle, everything coming back to the self in a way. And that's kind of what we say also, you know, the diamond of the self, like, you know, coming back to that place in the middle where we get informed by all these parts, but we're not pulled away by any of them. And that's the presence. I believe it is, you know, in that place of in the body graph, maybe in the diamond of the self. It's like when we know who we are, when we know what love is, and we have that direction, that is an orientation in the present. That's not a business to get somewhere or do something.
Do you have a picture of the body graph that we could just look at first for a minute?
Sure, let's look at it in the
welcome for our new joinees. So when you were speaking about, you know, where did consciousness live as an insect? And when we consider the existential nature, meaning there's literally no meaning to any of the activity other than the survival of self or the survival of the species itself. Yeah. Do you have like a body graph with some of the numbers, all of the gates?
Yeah, so what we're seeing here is what I was, you know, I don't know, it's too small. What can you see? So here
it's kind of small, yeah.
Because this is where we have all the different channels that are
I see.
That are with the 20, but we can
I gotcha. No, let's look at that for a minute, because that actually takes me in a slightly different direction, but I like it.
It's
Yeah.
interesting. This is interesting because I hadn't seen that in integral human design, we call this the stream of self-expression, which kind of is that. I'm busy with my own being. So that's going to be my self-expression. It's connected to the throat, and it's about my behavior, it's my life force and my intuition. Of course, it's going to be self-expression, but I had never seen it. I've never noticed it before. And then it goes to the throat, where we have that emergence of who we are.
Well, and I think it's very interesting that the gate in the throat is the closest sound to silence that exists. There is no, if there's silence, there's no sound. But we think about the throat in expression, and the only thing that we do with our throat as an expression is make sound. And here we are with the sacred Om for this particular energy. And it's the only sound that describes the silence as well as the vibration of everything, and at once. And when you think about, like, how do you make that sound with your being? There's this like force starting in your sacral area, and it just like moves up through you into your throat and out into the world. And what is that expression? I mean, this might be the ultimate question of contemplation. What is consciousness? And it's not that the answer to that question defines consciousness, because that would be impossible. It only gives us an idea or a feeling or a vibration of consciousness that exists. And, we have these three channels that all kind of come together, and the bottom, the channel of awareness, plays directly into this 20, because while you're talking about what's going on here with the with everything in our connection to this one gate, and there's all of this evolutionary movement happening through us. We have our spleen activated, our ajnas are busy, and we're also feeling the emotional waves of the solar plexus in one way or another, depending on our design. And it's like the only thing to do with all of that is observe it, to bring your awareness to it, to contemplate it, maybe. I think of it almost like a non-thinking form of contemplation, and I don't even know how to do that.
That I think that's really good what you're saying, because I often feel like the word contemplation brings us to the mind. And that's why I often say inner inquiry, because inner inquiry feels like it can happen anywhere. Like it can happen in the heart, which is really nice, and it can happen in the sensations. So for me, here we don't have mental activity. Like this is the throat, and it's pointing downwards to the intuition, to the life force, to who you are as your true self. It's not pointing to mental activity. It's pointing to observing everything in that present moment. And it comes from connecting to those other energy centers. So for me, definitely, it's not about, we can see it. Like, why am I saying don't do the gene keys without doing human design? Because you're losing the mechanics. Here, there's no question.
Right.
There is no mental activity. There isn't. It's an awareness in the now.
Yes, it's almost as if when you can lose yourself in the lyrical poetry of Richard Rudd's sonorous voice, and you forget about the sort of like hard-nosed, like clear and concise and defined way in which the energy actually functions in our system, which was completely embodied by Ra. I mean, it's so kind of amusing to me to see those two personalities and how they approached all of these possibilities. And, like, if we're considering, I'm loving the conversation, by the way, everyone. The question that popped up about, is this the channel of the 2027? And the reflections of moving into the now rather than future and past. That's absolutely the theme of the tranquil. And the reason the archetype, and from my perspective, is the tranquil, and it's mentioned, this is a very calm energy. Indeed it is, but only at a higher frequency is it a calm energy. The tranquil archetype is not flustered by activity. So from my own experience, carrying this particular gene key in my activation sequence, there's a feeling of imperturbability that happens within. And perhaps that's, to a degree, a taste of the gift frequency, especially in situations where there is hectic energy. Even in cases where if I was behaving in a hectic manner, there was still an inner calm inside that no one else could possibly be aware of. I may have appeared frenetic to others in certain circumstances or situations, but there's like this calmness, the tranquil on the inside. It's like being absorbed within yourself. And that's why it feels calm to be there. I don't know if anyone else has this particular managing an ER. That's totally, this is one of the places where the tranquil can absolutely shine, because in situations of emergency, most people's ajnas go haywire because there's so much energy coming from their sacral region, or being passed around. All of a sudden, in an emergency, everybody's conditioning just goes. And here's somebody with the 20 who just has this tranquility inside and the self-assurance to just make a decision and take action, which, maybe it's the best action possible. Maybe it's not. But it doesn't really matter, because that 20 is like moving energy into that space that provides that channel to a higher possibility. And it's really, when thinking about humanity as a whole, adopting this energy into our consciousness, unconsciously adopting it, it really strikes me how massively this world would be different, in like overnight. I don't know, Bella, if you've considered that before in the sort of the context of the 55 and the evolution. And obviously, we still get to deal with time, but if we could experience this coming evolution as like one present now for the next 100 years, what would the tranquil look like coming into humanity, and how would we change? Oh, you're muted somehow.
I don't have a preference for the tranquil. Like, I think that's the beauty. You know, that's the beauty of the Black Panther, the 34, who's connected to the tranquil. Like sometimes that jaguar or panther or, you know, whatever being we are is going to go with that force and be the king of the jungle. And it's like there is a time for everything. So for me, like it sounds super boring to have like a really tranquil 100 years. Like I don't want to have that. But I like how it has so many connections, like we were saying. And I like that there is not, like with the wind, you know, this is the wind. So the wind is going to be a hurricane one day, and the other day is going to be a breeze. And then you're going to be one day where not even a leaf is moving. And that's the beauty. And I think, again, that this is the receptivity of the feminine, and also the volcano of Shakti that says, sometimes I have a bliss inside that is so subtle. So if you don't penetrate me, you won't feel it. Like that's how subtle it is. And other times it's a volcano that's erupting. Like that's Shakti. And for me, that tranquil can kind of, you know, be present with that. And also if we think about it in terms of the elements and we look at it, you know, that I love this, you know, this is lovemaking for me. This is responding to life. Self-assurance is intuitive orientation. So if I show up like that volcano, or I show up like that thing that is so subtle, so you really have to be very still inside of me to feel it, you know, if you can orient with that, however I show up, that is going to be the quality of self-assurance. And that is going to allow Shakti, life force on this earth, to be alive, whether she's tranquil or not. You know, that's the whole thing. And that's the presence. Presence is clarity of unity, because there is a clarity when you know how to come into unity with me, whether I'm a volcano or I'm an internal bliss, you know? So for me, it's like, I love that we see it's listening to the whispering wind and responding to life with complete trust. And sometimes it's a whispering wind, and sometimes it's a hurricane. Are you okay with that? Or are you wishing to have 100 years of tranquility and like perfect presence? No, we don't want that.
Yeah, I'm glad that my question brought that out of you in some form or other, that, you know, as if all of a sudden there's going to be these new genetic babies born in 2027, and then there's just going to be like 1,000 years of peace, you know, like all of the interpretations of the old prophecies is like, oh, when we get to the golden age, it's going to be 1,000 years of peace or something to that nature. And we can look at the tranquil and think, oh, nothing happens around one who is tranquil. But that isn't quite it. It's that nothing escapes the awareness of the tranquil. And in that state, it does not matter how much activity is going on. It does not matter how hard the wind is blowing. If the hurricane is raging, nothing escapes your awareness. So nothing can move your inner stability, that sense that everything is perfect, that everything is not only perfect, but is working in harmony to create the greatest possible outcomes, no matter how painful those outcomes are, or how much suffering people experience as a result. It's like oftentimes in our, you know, when we get busy, the thing that we get focused on is cause and effect. If I do this, this is what happens. So I'm going to do this until this happens, right? It's like the masculine version of physical manifestation, right? If you take an axe to a tree and you keep chopping at it, eventually the tree's going to fall over. So, you know, maybe you're weak, maybe your axe is like blunt. If you keep going, eventually it'll fall. That's how our minds work, is that, interestingly, that forceful strategy of creation. But here in the 20, it's like, you speak about Shakti, Bella, it's the ultimate feminine presence. And the ability to recognize and be aware of the perfection of creation, and that you don't need to manifest anything ever.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing, this goes back to our conversation last week. Like, is this the ultimate perfect feminine presence? Or is this the lovemaking between the feminine and the masculine, where the presence is the banks of the river for the feminine to erupt, but also, and then again, it kind of becomes the other way around, because if this is receiving with a second with a second and the wind, like, then it's the receiving. So can we receive fully the masculine, right? So it's both ways around, but more, I feel like it's probably more that dance again between the polarities, and that's the only way to the future. And we see in the highest frequency, we saw that unity. So what did it say? So the presence is the clarity of unity. So for sure is intuitive orientation.
Yeah, true. I mean, clarity is the masculine quality. Unity is the feminine. So what happens when these two get together? And that love making is not only, it's not even an activity, but the beingness of their presence together. And, you know, the only answer that I can come up with that doesn't give an answer is that sound of Om. It's the pure vibration of everything. And that can only exist within that, what we might call feminine void space, if you will. But it doesn't even have a quality to it. You know, it's like almost beyond quality. But if we were gonna choose one, you know, out of our polarities, it feels like a portal into the void that is also a womb, that is also a birth canal, that is also this, like, it's the possibility for creation. And then these two polarities come together in a divine entanglement. And what's left is presence. I mean, it's like,
yeah, and you don't,
pure magic.
Yeah, and it's also, you don't even have to go far and deep, because it's always there. It is to, like, receive what is as it is without any need to change it. And like you were saying, nothing is escaping the awareness. And then there is no fear of merging anymore, because that's the biggest wound. It's really about being afraid of not being completely received, maybe then for the masculine, or not being capable of completely receiving what is the way exactly the way it is, like wanting to receive it in another way. But the real mother doesn't have a preference of what that child is or how to receive it. It's receiving it for what it is, in complete acceptance.
Yeah, the idea that popped up for me was that in that cosmic mother space, the presence of the awareness is what brings us into our evolutionary process by existential experience, by contemplative, I don't know if that's even an activity, and by absolute feeling of all that we can perceive. And it's like when your awareness expands that much, then there is almost unlimited space for consciousness to manifest through you. We just came from the 8, and it was kind of, we were beginning to speak about how does consciousness incarnate into the body, and then how does it, how does that happen? Like, where does that fit with the unity of everything? And here it's like the full-blown expression of the expansiveness of consciousness coming into the body and eventually transcending even the notion of a body. It's just like an unthinkable reality to experience, at least from how I see it. Well, yes, the codon ring of life and death. We are, I do believe we have covered the rest of those gene keys in that codon ring, and this is the final installment of that. And it feels like tranquility and chaos and bliss and suffering all mixed into one unimaginable package. Bella, any final thoughts before we move into our transmission of energies to complement this gentle wind blowing over the grasslands of the earth?
Yeah, for me, it lands in that one word of acceptance. And maybe even what Osho was saying, like if you go back to the love-making quality, like somehow that transpersonal, like at a high level, I think it doesn't even matter. Like nothing matters. It's just a complete acceptance of everything, whether it is as I'm sitting here or in lovemaking, or I'm walking on the street, or like it's this complete acceptance and this complete awareness of what is. And it's very, yeah, I guess it's somehow, I feel like I've never resonated with Osho in that way. And I would like to look at his design in what he means, because for me, like I always say, we have human bodies, we have animal bodies, human hearts, and creator minds. And I feel that when we are too much in the kind of like it doesn't matter, or in the spiritual, we could somehow be portraying the lower parts of us. So for me, it needs an integration of everything, and that's what makes us unique. And then we're actually more selective in what we merge with. So for me, it's not that transpersonal, but somehow with this keynote, it makes me feel like it would not say no to anything, because actually it's an illusion that you can say no to life. You can't say no to life. And all these centers are going to respond in some way. Your behavior, your life force, your intuition, whatever it is that you're observing, whatever it is that you are receiving, that you're accepting, it's going to influence you, to evolve you, to shape you, to be. And I feel that's probably where the evolution comes. The more we can receive life in awareness, that is evolution, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when you consider that awareness that leads to nothing matters, and even in this gene key speaks about some of the beings who have had this city come into their awareness and into their being. And that oftentimes, because of that nothing mattering, not being able to feed themselves or take care of their own physical bodies, there's a specific term for that in the yogic tradition. And it really speaks to the unique role that each individual plays in the world. As that being may be experiencing that nothing matters, that being is also radiating out into the world this presence of tranquility, not of peace, but of, as you mentioned, that acceptance and that awareness. So,
and I'm gonna address the question in the Q&A, because I kind of think it's when we have webinars. So here we have a split definition where the 20 would bridge the split. And the way we can see splits when there are small splits where one single gate would bridge it is that in the mechanics of our being are going to look for that. So if you have the 20 that's going to bridge your split, it's very possible that you're seeking this, and that you're going to feel in other people, and you won't know why you're attracted to them, but it's because you're always in mechanics. The hanging gates are like arms and they're looking for the other side. It's not that it makes you anything different than you are. You're always going to be a split definition. Like I'm looking for the 29 to death, and I'm sometimes going down to the abyss and trying to be saying yes until, the last drop of blood, because I want to feel the energy of that 29, but it never makes me a single definition. So to just know that this is also the wind, like we were saying, the wind is always changing. If you don't have this gate, it can never be consistent in you, and you're never going to be single definition. Your life experience is supposed to be like that wind that is changing all the time. You're going to have different flavors of the 20 and different frequencies of the 20. And if you have other gates that are bridging your split, the same thing. And you probably are going to see, if you have 3 gates that bridge your split, you're probably going to see in yourself that you have a preference for one of them. Whether you're making the charts of your family, your partners, the people around you, you're going to be like, oh, that's the gate that's always present. Or it might, so I would say, be curious about it. And know that you're here to have the experience of what is it to be split. What's that experience? That's what you can learn from, and never try to be anything else. And it's not that one gate would change, you're not supposed to have it. So it's not a what if, even. So thank you for that question. And I like to have a few questions in the webinars, because it makes it more alive to know that you're here and that we're learning together and observing and inquiring together.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. So for everyone joining us in our discussion today of the Tranquil and Gene Key 20, thank you for your presence. And as always, I'm sending loving presence from my heart to yours. And we're going to continue now with this air-ish element, quantum transmission for the sound of Om. And with our members, if you haven't heard about that before, you can join our membership and receive the quantum transmissions. But thank you for all of your participation. Really nice to have your presence here. It really makes a big impact on our discussion. And even if you said nothing in the chat, it's felt, and we appreciate you being here. So with that, enjoy the rest of your transit through Gate 20, and we will see you next time. So bye-bye for now.